Hello, welcome back to The Witness. And we're about to go through Symmetry Island's Symmetry. Symmetry Island, which is all about suffering. Maybe it is Symmetry Island. Anyway, take a look at this trunk. This trunk is the most profound tree of this whole entire region. There's so much meaning. Meditate on this. Now, if you ever played Stanley Parable, they'll say the same thing about a tree and they're joking. I'm not. Meditate on this tree. It will enrich your life. Especially when you look at that tree as well. And combine the both, it will really mean a lot to you. Meditate on both trees. Your life will be so much better. Just spend minutes meditating on those trees. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Witness. This is not a blind run. This is a informative walkthrough looking at the many symbols of the witness and the hidden meaning behind everything. Just to quickly recap, we talked about Werner, who was trying to blend mysticism with the realistic thinking of science of Albert Einstein, and the mysticism can be blended somewhat because most of them believe in an impersonal God, basically a god of nature, and that basically the god of nature brought all things into existence and we're part of that. So they believe in old Earth. And in fact, I extended that reasoning, that question out, and said, can Christianity to somewhat be blended with science? Because most Christian religions actually believe in old Earth as well. Because there's been a greater understanding about the Aramaic language, which the Bible was written in, that basically a day, such as a day of creation, is just an unspecified period of time, such as the day of God or the day of judgment. It's not a 24-hour period. It's basically just means an unspecified period of time for that task to take place. The Aramaic language, or the old Aramaic language, was very, very basic, and a lot of the words had several meanings behind them. So you had to look at the context to work that out. But not all religions. Some religions are young earths, such as Seventh-day Adventists, and as we said, they will never have that blending. Also, a lot of religions agree with science and microevolution. There's no problems with that. But where we do differ amongst Christianity and science is when it comes to macroevolution. Scientists will tell you it's a exclamation point, and basically Christians say, well, no, it's more of a question mark than an exclamation point. Where's the proof of macroevolution? And that is that one kind will evolve into another kind. Well, there's all these natural laws that stop that from happening. For instance, a banana tree will only produce bananas. Okay, now let's continue on, and we're going to where do we start on this? So we start with the Shinto gate, which is Japanese and often used in Chinese Buddhism. So we go through this belief system, and one of the first things we're going to come across is an audio device. Before we click on the audio device, you'll notice there's some kwai fish in the background. These tree trunks turn into kwai fish. In Buddhism, kwai fish represents courage, because kwai fish have to swim upstream if they're to get where they need to be. So it often takes courage. They're a symbol of courage, and also purpose, meaningful courage that is fueled by purpose. Now, also what's interesting is you've got a black choir fish with a white symbol, and you've got a white choir fish with a black symbol. These, I can't remember which, I think this is father and this is son. So that's the symbols, choir fish symbol in Buddhism. So what we're going to do is we're going to come here and we're going to play this audio device.
Formerly, you appeared to me, O Lord, as invisible by every creature because you are a hidden, infinite God. Infinity, however, is incomprehensible by every means of comprehending. Later, you appeared to me as visible by all. For a thing exists only as you see it, and it would not actually exist unless it saw you. For your vision confers being, since your vision is your essence. Thus, my God, you are equally invisible and visible. As you are invisible, as the creature is, which exists only insofar as the creature sees you, you are visible. You, therefore, my invisible God, are seen by all, and in all sight you are seen by everyone who sees. You who are invisible, who are both absolute from everything visible and infinitely super exalted, are seen in every visible thing and in every act of vision. Therefore, I must leap across this wall of invisible vision to where you are to be found. But this wall is both everything and nothing. For you, who confront as if you were both all things and nothing at all, dwell inside that high wall which no natural ability can scale by its own power. Nicholas of Cusa, 1453.
Okay, so this is actually quite a complicated thing. First of all, the reason why it was placed here is because, as we said before, to concentrate on the visible thing in order to see the invisible. So, again, that line became invisible, but we concentrated on the visible line, and we knew where the invisible line was going. So, Nicholas of Cusa was a cardinal who was trying to blend now Christianity with mysticism. So here we had a person that was trying to blend mysticism with science, and this guy is trying to blend Christianity with mysticism in the fact of he was I believe it's pronounced pandeist in the way that he believes that God, who was existent before, had turned himself into the universe and became all things. Not us. We're separate because he created us to be so. But we all belong to God. Now, so in a way he believed in a natural God, but that natural God was a God that was independent of that nature, that he turned himself to be that way. There's a couple of things here. Also, he talks about that needing to leap to perception. By reflecting on the visible things, one can leap to see the invisible things. And because there's a lot of people that will not believe in God, like I've heard scientists say, I won't believe in God unless if he visibly shows himself and shakes my hand or something along those lines, I'm not going to believe in God. And you'll have other people that will say, look, I don't believe in God because of all the suffering. Such as Richard Dawkins, he talks often about the worm that eats a child's eyeball. And he goes, what's the purpose of that? And I don't think that was the original purpose of the worm. But he does have some point, like what is the purpose of a spider's web? Something's got to suffer there. So evidently suffering seems to be part of a purpose, a design. And again, a lot of people find that hard because of what they go through to believe in this concept of God. Now, another thing is a lot of people say, where did God come from? See, infinity is impossible to comprehend. But what Nicholas of Cusa is trying to say is you can make that leap if you concentrate on the visible things, which is strange because all the arguments that we've just brought up are from people that are concentrating on the visible things, are concentrating on the suffering, are concentrating on these things, and they just can't make that leap. But what he's saying is, well, explain to an ant how you came into existence. You can't. You just can't. Even if you knew the ant language, the ant isn't going to be able to understand. But the ant can see you visibly exist if he concentrates on the shadow, even though he doesn't understand. And in the same way, if we look at the visible things, then we can start to see the invisible. For instance, if I was to pull out my phone out of my pocket and tell you that my phone just formed, you wouldn't believe it, because the evidence is in the details. The details that are only perceivable through perception. You can see that phone had a design, a purpose, and from that you can see that there must have been an intelligent design. No accident ever produces details. I can throw an endless amount of infinite grenades in a paint shop. A Rembrandt is never going to form, no matter how infinite amount of times I throw the grenades. Details only come through intelligent design. And in the same thing, if you have a look at the detail, then you will be able to make that leap. And the way he makes that word different is, first of all, before we go on to that, do you see all these exposed roots? They're everywhere. The whole island is of exposed roots. And you'll notice that the whole island actually has painted stumps as well. Now, first of all, the exposed roots. The exposed roots are a symbol in Buddhism to show suffering, to show harsh environments, to endurance against suffering, endurance against hardships. So again, you see that constant reference amongst the whole island. You'll also see that every puzzle is only solved by concentrating on the visible things. So again, having to look at all the visible markers in. So if we come down here, now I actually said that Jonathan Bloom, for some reason, the developer's name's Jonathan Blow, who developed Braid beforehand. So I got his name wrong. So forgive me, Jonathan Blow, the JP in the sky, for mentioning your name wrong. So there's one puzzle, and that will fly off and do the desert marker obelisk. And there's another environmental puzzle up the top there. So when you look at symbiosis, now we know symbiosis exists, such as a flea on a dog. Okay. Even amongst the visible world, we know hypersymbiosis exists, such as a protozoa in a flea and a dog. And there's parasitic symbiosis as much as there's, beneficiary symbiosis. But what Nicholas of Cusis is saying is when you concentrate on the visible things and God is everything, then you start to see that it might be possible that there's a complex hypersymbiosis, such as a protozoa and a flea and a dog on a god. And Nicholas of Cusa, who was a pandeist, who was trying to blend Christianity with mysticism, was blending his mysticism with this mysticism of the 700.
One nature, perfect and pervading, circulates in all natures. One reality, all comprehensive, contains within itself all realities. The one moon reflects itself wherever there is a sheet of water, and all the moons and the waters are embraced within the one moon. The absolute of all the Buddhas enters into my own being, and my own being is found in union with theirs. The inner light is beyond praise and blame. Like space, it knows no boundaries. Yet it is even here, within us, ever retaining its serenity and fullness. It is only when you hunt for it that you lose it. You cannot take hold of it, but equally you cannot get rid of it. And while you can do neither, it goes on its own way. You remain silent, and it speaks. You speak, and it is done. The great gate of charity is wide open, with no obstacles before it. Yongcha Tashi, circa 700.
Okay, so this is from the Chan school of Chinese Buddhism. This is the same mystic belief that, what was his name now? Nicholas Akusa was trying to say. Basically that when we reflect on the visible things, that we see the invisible, in that what we need to reach God is before us. It's placed there. It's already placed by the invisible God, who has become all things. That everything that we need to get to know or see God is there. And we see the patterns because it all comes from the one thing, that one unity. And in some respects, science will say that all things came from a big bang, from a singular entity. And when you look at the unity, the harmony of things, you can see that all things come from that one thing. And that one thing may be our own perception in the way that we perceive it, but we all have that ability, no matter what we suffer, to be able to make that leap. And that's placed before us. Now, what's interesting about this belief is he's saying that regardless of what we suffer, even if we can't perceive individually the reason for it, then we can find some comfort when we are courageous enough to see that there must be a purpose, a plan, a designer. There's a comfort in knowing that there's a reason, even if we don't individually are able to see it. And what's interesting about that, we talked about the tree before. When we concentrated on the tree visibly, we only saw a tree drooping. But when we reflect upon it, we can now see that the tree has a purpose, a pattern, a place that we can only see once we start reflecting on the invisible things. And what's interesting about that is because both Nicholas Akusa and Yongcha Tashi, they believe that God was the center of all things, and that center of all things had a purpose, what we might not be able to detect ourselves. So when we come back to this tree, now what you might not know is that trees are protected by being painted white, because white reflects the sun, so the tree doesn't overheat in a harsh environment. So we can see that the tree may be protected, but it didn't stop it from being mortal. And that's interesting when you compare it to that siren over there, because the Greek mythology was blended in with Christianity, the same Christianity, that believed that a siren, as the mythology goes, would often attract sailors by its voice, by its beautiful voice, to its peril. and unless if they avoided the siren's voice, then they would always die. Usually an early death in what Buddhism claims is a sea of suffering. The Greeks also claimed it to be the same thing. So, but as the Christianity side of things went, is that there was one sailor that was able to put tie himself up to a mast and basically put buds in his ears and stopped himself from listening to the siren's voice, and went through past the siren and went on past mortality. So regardless of all the suffering, he was able to pass it because he didn't succumb to the vices of the world, to his individual vices. Now, what's interesting about that, when you compare all these things together, is you got a tree stump here. The tree in itself doesn't see its purpose. But it doesn't mean that there wasn't a purpose for that tree. That tree may have helped make that, create that, workshop over there. So what this thought of blending mysticism and Christianity, this deist belief, is that we can find comfort if we look in past the suffering into the visible things and see that everything, the details, that everything has a purposeful design. And I'll finish off on a Buddhist quote, because there's 30,000 religions in this world, which is crazy, over 30,000. But there's one Buddhist quote that I really like, and it says that a tree isn't biased in who it gives its shade to. And in the same, when it comes to religion or science or evolution, why should we ever be so biased in giving out shade? That's why we all find trees so peaceful. Maybe everyone, no matter what religion, what nationality, whatever your opinions are, please don't be biased when giving out shade. Well, I'm going to leave it there. I hope you've enjoyed this little discussion. Continue on as we go to the Sand Temple and discover all the secrets out there. And did I show you, because there were two parts, there was one part, and you can also do this one too. Wasn't sure, and that will also go to the Desert Obelisk. Well, I hope you've enjoyed all these little tidbits about what you can get out of the witness. Until next time, bye for now.